Clara held her breath, peering through the viewfinder of her trusty speed graphic camera. The lens. A solid piece of German engineering felt heavy and cool in her hands. In front of her, Mrs. Henderson, a woman whose face was usually creased with worry lines from managing the local dry cleaner, was attempting to smile. It was her 50th wedding anniversary, and Clara's job was to capture a moment of pure, unadulterated joy. "Just a little wider, Mrs. Henderson," Clara coaxed, her voice soft but firm. "Think of that first dance." Mrs. Henderson's smile stiffened. Her husband, Mr. Henderson, looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, perhaps fixing a clogged drain or arguing about baseball scores. Clara sighed internally. This was her life. Or at least, weddings, birthday parties, grand openings for new shoe stores, high school sports, team photos where half the kids blinked. She'd snapped 1,000 smiles, 1,000 posed stances, 1,000 forced moments. Clara loved photography. She'd fallen for it. The moment her father, a hobbyist who dreamt of being a photojournalist but ended up selling insurance, had shown her how to develop a negative in their dimly lit bathroom. The magic of an image appearing from nowhere, slowly, beautifully, was something that still gave her a thrill. But these days, the magic felt a little routine. She worked for the Memphis Chronicle, mostly on the social pages, and sometimes, if she was lucky, a local feature. Her boss, old Mr. Finch, was a good man, but he saw photos as functional items, not art. Just get the shot, Clara. Clear and in focus. People want to see themselves, not some fancy angle. Clara understood. Bills had to be paid, but deep down she yearned for something more. She wanted to capture raw emotion, unvarnished truth. She wanted to find a subject that would electrify her. Something that would make her camera feel less like a tool and more like an extension of her soul. She spent her evenings in her small apartment, flipping through dusty old photography magazines, looking at images of jazz musicians in smoky clubs, striking portraits of everyday people, the kind of photos that made you feel something long after you'd turned the page. Memphis in the early 1950s was a city buzzing with its own unique rhythm. The air was thick with the scent of barbecue and the distant hum of blues. Music spilling from juke joints on Beale Street. It was a crossroads, a melting pot of sounds, country blues, gospel rhythm, and blues. Clara felt it, this vibrant energy, but she hadn't yet found a way to truly capture it through her lens. Her assignments kept her tethered to the mundane, to the polite smiles and predictable poses. She remembered a few weeks ago overhearing some of the younger reporters talking about a new sound, something emerging from a small recording studio on Union Avenue called Sun Records. They'd spoken of a raw, untamed energy, a blending of sounds that was unlike anything else. Clara had dismissed it at the time. Another local band, another fleeting trend. She'd heard it all before. Sometimes, when she was developing film in the darkroom, the rhythmic drip of the chemicals and the faint glow of the red safe light would make her mind wander. She'd think of the sounds of Memphis, the way the light fell on the worn brick of old buildings, the unspoken stories in people's eyes. She knew there was something waiting for her out there, a moment, a person, a story that would ignite her passion again. She just hadn't found it yet. "Okay, Mrs. Henderson, Mr. Henderson, one more." "Big smiles for the Chronicle," Clara called out, forcing a cheerful note into her voice. She clicked the shutter, the sound of familiar clunk. Another day, another set of negatives for the newspaper archives. She packed up her gear, the weight of the camera feeling heavier than usual today. She was a good photographer, everyone agreed, but she wanted to be great. And greatness, she knew, lay not in capturing forced smiles, but in finding the truth, the spark that made someone truly shine. She just had to find that spark. Little did she know that spark was already crackling just a few blocks away, waiting to explode. The smell of fresh ink was a comfort to Clara. It mingled with the faint scent of stale coffee and the clatter of typewriters, the everyday symphony of the Memphis Chronicle newsroom. She was at her desk, sifting through a pile of contact sheets from a rather dreary city council meeting. Every face was a blur of boredom or feigned interest. "Anything good, Clara?" asked Frank, a sports reporter who always had a half-eaten sandwich nearby. Clara sighed, pushing a stray strand of hair from her eyes. "Just more politicians looking like they're about to fall asleep," Frank chuckled. "Sounds about right, you know. I heard something interesting the other day down at the diner." Clara raised an eyebrow, suddenly intrigued. Frank was good at picking up on the city's pulse. "Oh, do tell. It's about this new singer. Or a group, I'm not sure, but everyone's talking about how different they are. Apparently they're recording down at Sun Records." Clara vaguely remembered the name Sun Records. It was a small independent studio known for recording blues artists. "Another bluesman?" she asked, not unkindly. Memphis was full of them, talented, raw, but she'd photographed plenty. "Nah, that's the thing," Frank said, leaning closer, his voice dropping conspiratorially. "People are saying it's a mixed country blues gospel, all mashed up. And the kid, they say he's got something. A real fire." Clara felt a flicker of interest. A fire? That sounded promising. Most of her assignments felt like trying to light a damp match. She'd heard the whispers before, but hearing it from Frank, who usually only cared about football scores, made it seem more substantial. Later that afternoon, Mr. Finch, her editor, called her into his office. His desk was piled high with newspapers and proofs, a testament to his decades in the business. He wore spectacles perched on his nose, and his tie was always a little crooked. "Clara, I've got a job for you," he said, not looking up from a layout. "There's a bit of a buzz, apparently. About the, Locomai Stamaj. Something's brewing, and I want you to go down to Sunrat de Cus." "Of course, Mr. Finch," she said, trying to keep her voice even professional. Inside, a small spark, long dormant, had just ignited. "Don't get too artsy, Clara," he warned finally, looking up a twinkle in his eye. "Just good, clean shots. We're not trying to win any awards here, just sell newspapers." "Understood," Clara replied, a polite smile on her face. But her mind was already rare artsy. She was going to find that fire Frank had talked about that evening. Clara didn't just pack her camera bag. She meticulously cleaned her lenses, making sure not a single speck of dust remained. She checked her flashbulbs, loaded fresh film, and even polished the worn leather of her camera case. This wasn't just another assignment. This felt different. She thought about the various bands she'd seen playing in local clubs. Most were earnest, talented even, but they lacked that undefinable something, that spark that separated a good musician from a true artist. She wondered what she would find tomorrow. Would it be just another blues band, another country croon, or something truly new? She remembered reading an article once about how a photographer doesn't just take a picture, they make one. They don't just point and shoot, they interpret, they feel, they try to capture the unseen. Clara felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about dogging it, this was about discovery. She drifted off to sleep. The low thrum of Memphis outside her window. A city on the cusp of something big. She didn't know it yet, but tomorrow her camera through her eyes would meet its destiny. It would meet a young man whose sound would shake the world, and in doing so, it would awaken a passion in her that she hadn't felt in years. The air was buzzing, and Clara was ready to capture the electrifying storm that was about to break. The morning sun cast long shadows across the streets of Memphis as Clara made her way towards Union Avenue. Camera bag, usually feeling like a familiar extension of her arm, seemed to thrum with a subtle anticipation today. The speed graphic nestled securely inside felt like a silent partner, ready for whatever lay ahead. Sun Records wasn't a grand, imposing studio. It was a small, unassuming building, barely more than a storefront tucked between a plumbing supply shop and a diner. The sign, faded by years of sun and rain, simply read, "SUN Records." In bold, unpretentious letters, Clara paused for a moment outside, taking it all in. This was where the Memphis sound was reportedly being born. He didn't look like much, but then she knew true magic rarely did. She pushed open the door, and a chime above her head announced her arrival. The air inside was thick with the scent of old wood dust and something else. A faint metallic tang that she recognized as the smell of electrical equipment and perhaps the ghost of countless hours of passionate music. The main room was small, dominated by a recording console and a few microphones. Acoustic tiles lined the walls, and a worn-out couch sat against one wall. It looked more like a garage than a ground-reigning music studio. A man with a kind, intelligent face, his hair neatly combed, looked up from some papers he was sifting through. He had an intensity in his eyes that spoke of deep dedication. This had to be Sam Phillips, the studio owner, the man behind the legendary recordings. "Can I help you?" he asked, a friendly, slightly tired smile on his face. "Yes, Mr. Phillips, I'm Clara Hayes from the Memphis Chronicle. Mr. Finch sent me. I'm here to take some photos of the artist, get a feel for the scene." Sam Phillips nodded, his smile widening slightly. "Ah, yes, the newspaper, always good to have the press around. We're making some noise here, Clara, come on in." He gestured to the room. "We're just getting ready for a session. The boys should be here any minute." Clara set her camera bag down carefully. She looked around, scanning the sparse room. It was clear this wasn't a place of glitz and glamour, but of raw creativity. The walls seemed to hum with echoes of music. She imagined all the legendary blues artists who must have stood right here, pouring their souls into these microphones. "So, who's recording today, Mr. Phillips?" she asked, pulling out her speed graphic and adjusting the settings. It felt good to have the solid weight of it in her hands. "Just Sam Phillips," said, and corrected himself with a chuckle. "Not me." "Another Sam? Sam Phillips is me. The singer's name is Elvis Presley. He's a young fellow, drives a truck, but when he opens his mouth, well, you just wait." There was a definite excitement in Phillips's voice, a genuine pride that Clara recognized. It wasn't a marketing pitch. It was the enthusiasm of someone who knew they were onto something special. Clara felt a tiny shiver of anticipation. An unknown truck driver. This was definitely not what she expected. She imagined a rough, around the edges, country singer, perhaps a bit shy in front of the camera. She prepared for the usual polite portrait, shots, perhaps some candid photos of him with his guitar. A few minutes later, the door creaked open again and 3 young men walked in. 2 of them, a bassist and a guitarist, looked like typical musicians. Worn jeans, casual shirts, a relaxed demeanor. But the third was different. He was tall, lean, with dark, slicked-back hair that fell into a dramatic pompadour. He wore a crisp shirt, the collar high, and trousers that seemed to ripple slightly with his movements. There was an energy about him, a coiled tension, and a vibrant presence that filled the small room the moment he stepped inside. He had a slight, almost shy smile, but his eyes, a startling blue, held a magnetic intensity. Clara felt something shift inside her. Her breath caught in her throat. Camera in her hands, usually just a tool, suddenly felt like a divining rod pointing towards an unseen force. It wasn't just a boy walking into a room. It was a phenomenon, Elvis Presley. He looked around the room, acknowledging Sam Phillips with a nod. Then his eyes flickered to Clara. For a split second, their gazes met. There was no arrogance, no artifice, just a direct, honest look. And in that moment, Clara felt an undeniable pull, a sense that the subject she had been searching for, the fire that would ignite her passion, had just walked through the door. Camera, solid and stoic in her hand, seemed to vibrate, ready. This wasn't going to be just another assignment. This was going to be something extraordinary. The Air and Sun records had shifted. Before, it was the quiet hum of a studio awaiting its talent. Now it crackled with a new energy, a barely contained buzz. Clara stood by the console, her camera resting lightly in her hands, watching the young man. Everyone called Elvis. He moved with an almost languid grace, yet every gesture held a hint of coiled power. His dark hair, meticulously sculpted into a pompadour, framed a face that was both handsome and earnest. He wore a simple, light-colored shirt, the collar turned up slightly, and dark trousers. But it wasn't his clothes or even his striking looks that caught Clara's eye. It was the way he held himself, a blend of youthful shyness and an undeniable, almost palpable charisma. He walked over to the other musicians, Scotty Moore, the guitarist, and Bill Black, the bassist. They exchanged a few quiet words, a comfortable camaraderie passing between them. Elvis had a way of leaning in, of listening intently that made him seem approachable, even humble. But beneath that quiet demeanor, Clara sensed a storm brewing. Sam Phillips clapped his hands together. "All right, boys, let's try that one again." "That's all right, Elvis. Let's get some more of that feeling you had yesterday, raw, uncut." Elvis nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips, picked up his acoustic guitar, strumming a few chords, his fingers moving deftly over the frets. Clara found herself unable to look away. Her photographer's instinct, dulled by months of mundane assignments, was suddenly roaring awake. This wasn't just a subject, this was a presence. She carefully raised her speed graphic, feeling the familiar weight and balance of it. Usually she approached a subject with a clear plan, eye level, good lighting, standard portrait. But with Elvis, her fingers tingled, itching to explore, to capture, not just his face, but the very essence of it. He positioned himself in front of the microphone, Scotty and Bill flanking him, closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and then nodded to Sam Phillips. "Ready, Elvis?" Sam asked, his hand hovering over the recording equipment. Elvis looked up, and for a fleeting moment his gaze met Clara's again. There was a directness, a raw honesty in his blue eyes that disarmed her. It was as if he saw her, not as a reporter, but as someone who understood. A flicker of something, perhaps vulnerability, perhaps a challenge passed between them. Then he smiled, a quick, natural flash of white teeth, and Clara felt her heart lurch. He leaned into the microphone, strummed a final chord, and then his voice filled the small studio. It wasn't like anything Clara had ever heard. It was raw and bluesy, yet infused with a country twang and a gospel fervor. It was soulful, rebellious, and undeniably exciting. His voice was smooth as velvet one moment, then raspy with emotion the next, and as he sang he began to move. It started subtly, a sway of his hips, a tap of his foot, a bob of his head. Then it intensified. His whole body seemed to become a part of the music, an extension of the rhythm. His legs moved, his arms gestured, his lips curled into a half smile as he poured every ounce of his being into the song. It wasn't rehearsed, it was simply him, giving everything to the music. Clara gasped softly. Her finger instinctively pressed the shutter button. The flash popped, illuminating him in a burst of light. It wasn't a posed shot. It was a reflex, an urge to capture this electrifying energy before it vanished. She wasn't just observing anymore. She was part of the moment, utterly captivating. Camera, usually a detached tool, felt alive in her hands. It was as if it too recognized the singular brilliance before it. Every click of the shutter felt like an affirmation, a desperate attempt to freeze this fleeting magic. Her mind raced, anticipating his next move, his next expression. She moved silently, instinctively, circling him, looking for the angle that would best convey this undeniable spark. The first time a camera saw Elvis Presley, it didn't just see a young man. It saw a legend in the making, and it was utterly, irrevocably in love. The small recording studio pulsed with an energy Clara had never before witnessed. Elvis wasn't just singing a song. He was living it, breathing it, letting it course through every fiber of his being. His voice, a mesmerizing blend of genres, filled the air, rich and resonant. But it was his presence, his raw, uninhibited performance that truly captivated Clara. He swayed, he twisted his legs, moving in a way that was both fluid and surprisingly powerful. His dark hair, previously so neat, now fell slightly across his forehead as he shook his head with the rhythm. His eyes, when they occasionally opened, were filled with a fierce concentration, a passion that burned brighter than any flashbulb. He wasn't performing for an audience. He was performing for the song itself, lost in its embrace. Clara raised her speed graphic again, her hands moving with an automatic precision that belied the storm of emotions swirling within her. Click! The flash popped, another moment frozen in time. She wasn't thinking about composition, about Mr. Finch's instructions for good, clean shots. She was simply reacting, her instincts guiding her, urging her to capture every nuance, every electrifying movement. She moved around the studio, finding new angles. She got low, pointing the camera up at him, emphasizing his powerful stance. She circled around to catch his profile, the intensity etched on his face as he hit a high note. She zoomed in on his hands, clutching the guitar, and then zoomed out to capture his full body as he threw his head back, lost in the music. Her camera was no longer just a metal box with a lens. It was a conduit, a third eye connecting her to the raw, untamed force that was Elvis Presley. She felt a connection, a shared understanding of this ephemeral magic. It was as if the lens itself was drawing him in, desperate to record every flicker of his spirit. Sam Phillips, behind the console, watched with a similar intensity, occasionally nodding his expression a mixture of pride and awe. Scotty Moore and Bill Black, the guitarist and bassist, were solid and reliable, providing the backbone for Elvis's explosive energy. But all eyes, including Clara's, were drawn to the young man in the center. There was a moment when Elvis mid-song spun slightly, and his eyes met Clara's again. This time there was no shyness, no hesitation. There was a glimmer of recognition, an unspoken acknowledgement of her presence over camera. He offered a quick, almost imperceptible smile, a flash of pure, unadulterated charm that made Clara's breath catch. It was a knowing smile, as if he understood that she wasn't just taking pictures, she was seeing him. She clicked the shutter, capturing that very smile, the energy radiating from him, the way his body moved with effortless grace. She felt a surge of exhilaration. This was it. This was the kind of photograph she had always yearned to take. Not a forced smile, but a genuine expression of joy, of passion, of a soul laid bare through music. The song ended, the final chord hanging in the air like a fading echo. Elvis stood still for a moment, breathing heavily, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple. The silence that followed was profound, heavy with the lingering reverberations of his performance. He opened his eyes, and the intensity softened, replaced by a quiet humility. He looked tired but exhilarated, like someone who had just run a marathon of the soul. He nodded to Sam Phillips, then gave a small, appreciative nod to Scotty and Bill. Clara lowered her camera, her hands trembling slightly, not from fatigue, but from the sheer adrenaline of the moment. She felt a buzzing in her ears, a lingering sense of awe. She had taken dozens of photos, but she knew deep in her gut that these weren't just shots. They were fragments of a moment, pieces of a burgeoning legend. Her camera, through her, had indeed fallen in love, not with a celebrity, but with the raw, pure, untamed talent of a young man on the cusp of changing the world. She couldn't wait to see what they had captured. After the last note faded, a profound silence settled in the small studio, heavy with the lingering echo of Elvis's voice. He stood for a moment, catching his breath, the raw energy of his performance slowly receding, replaced by a more subdued, almost shy demeanor. Clara, still holding her camera, felt as though she had just witnessed something sacred. Her fingers tingled from the rapid clicks of the shutter, and her mind replayed every gesture, every expression, every fluid movement he had made. This wasn't merely a performance. It was an outpouring of soul. Sam Phillips broke the silence. That's the one. That's the sound. His voice was filled with an almost reverent excitement. Elvis offered a tired but genuine smile. Running a hand through his now slightly disheveled hair, he looked over at Clara. "How were they, ma'am? Hope I didn't move too much for your camera." His voice was soft, courteous, a stark contrast to the powerful roar that had just filled the room. Clara felt a blush creep up her neck. "No, not at all, Mr. Presley." She managed, her voice a little shaky. "You were incredible. I think we got some truly special shots." She hadn't realized how close she had gotten, how utterly absorbed she had become. "Good," he said, and his blue eyes held a flicker of something she recognized as hope, perhaps a touch of vulnerability. Just trying to make a good record. She knew it was more than that. He wasn't just making a record, he was forging a new sound, a new way of being. And she, with her camera, had been there to witness its birth. She spent the next few minutes taking a few more posed shots at Sam Phillips's request. Elvis sat on a stool holding his guitar. A more controlled version of his earlier energy, but even in these static poses, his charisma shone through. His eyes still held that captivating depth, and a slight confident smirk would occasionally play on his lips. Clara made sure to capture a mix of both, the raw, explosive energy of his performance and the quiet, almost shy young man beneath it. She saw the interplay of light on his pompadour catching the sheen of hair lacquer. She noticed the way his hands, surprisingly elegant despite their calloused tips from hours of playing, rested on his guitar. She felt a powerful urge to capture the story, not just of the music but of the man. As the session wrapped up, Sam Phillips approached her. "Clara, thank you. These photos, I have a feeling they're going to be important." He said it with a quiet conviction that resonated with her. "I have a feeling too, Mr. Phillips," she replied, her voice steady now, filled with a newfound confidence. She gathered her equipment, her hands still tingling, her mind racing with the possibilities that lay within the film canisters in her bag. Elvis, who had been talking quietly with Scotty and Bill, looked over one last time. He gave her a small wave, a genuine, friendly gesture. Clara returned it, a smile spreading across her face. Walking out of Sun Records, the bustling sounds of Union Avenue seemed distant, muted. Clara felt light, exhilarated. The weight of her camera bag felt different now. It felt like a treasure chest, filled not just with film, but with potential, with discovery. She thought about the thousands of mundane photos she had taken over the years, the countless smiles, the forced poses, the routine clicks. Today was different. Today her camera hadn't just documented, it had danced. It had moved with a passionate rhythm, guided by her surging instinct, drawn in by the magnetic pull of her subject. It had captured not just an image, but a feeling, a moment of pure, unadulterated artistry. She knew with an unwavering certainty that these photos were special. They were more than just pictures for the Memphis Chronicle. They were a testament to a truth she had always sought, that a camera in the right hands could truly fall in love with its subject, capturing its soul, its fire, its very essence. And in doing so, it could help show the world something it had never seen before. Her heart pounded with anticipation for the darkroom. The darkroom at the Memphis Chronicle was Clara's sanctuary. It was a small, windowless space, perpetually smelling of chemicals, with a faint red glow from the safe light casting long, distorted shadows. Usually, it was a place of quiet, methodical work, a necessary step in her routine. Tonight, however, it felt like a magical chamber, a place where secrets were revealed. Clara carefully unloaded the film from her camera, her movements precise and deliberate. Her hands, usually steady, trembled slightly with a mix of anticipation and excitement. She thought back to the energy in Sun Records, the electrifying presence of Elvis Presley, and how her camera had seemed to hum in response. Every click, every pop of the flash, had felt less like a job, and more like a desperate attempt to capture lightning in a bottle. She began the development process, immersing the film in the developer solution. The timer started its slow, rhythmic tick. Clara leaned against the counter, her eyes fixed on the developing tank as if willing the images to appear faster. The air was thick with the scent of chemicals, but to her it smelled like possibility. This was the moment of truth. She had felt the magic, but had her camera truly captured it? Had she been able to translate that raw charisma, that explosive talent into tangible images? After the precise time had elapsed, she moved the film through the stop bath, and then into the fix. Finally, she turned on the white light, holding the film strip up to examine the negatives. Her breath hitched. There he was, Elvis. The negatives were a dance of light and shadow, but even in their inverted form, the energy was undeniable. One shot showed him, leaning into the microphone, his head thrown back, a vein throbbing in his neck, pure passion contorting his face. Another captured him mid-sway, his legs a blur, his dark hair almost flying, a powerful study in motion. There was the one where he looked directly into her lens, a fleeting moment of connection, his blue eyes piercing even through the grainy film. Clara felt a profound sense of satisfaction, a thrilling validation of her instincts. These weren't just standard portraits. They were alive. The light caught the sheen on his hair, the sweat on his brow, the subtle tension in his jaw. Composition, though largely instinctive in the moment, now revealed itself as dynamic, framing his intensity perfectly. She moved on to printing the contact sheets, then began selecting specific frames for enlargement. She worked tirelessly, oblivious to the late hour. Her focus absolute. As each print emerged from the developing tray floating into view, she saw the magic unfold. First, a faint outline, then slowly, painstakingly, the details emerged. Texture of his shirt, the gleam of his guitar, the curl of his lip, and then his eyes. Those startling blue eyes, now clear and sharp in the print, held a captivating depth, a mix of vulnerability and defiant energy. Clara held up one particular print. It was a close-up taken when he'd been completely lost in the music, his mouth open, a raw sound pouring out. The light from her flash had caught the curve of his cheekbone, the slight shadow under his chin highlighting the powerful lines of his face. It wasn't a conventional beauty shot. It was a shot of pure, unadulterated rock and roll in the making. It was a moment of transcendence. She had captured the fire. Her camera, her loyal companion, had not only seen Elvis Presley, but had, through her guiding hands, truly fallen in love with him. It had responded to his unique energy, absorbing it, translating it into something tangible and permanent. These photos weren't just images. They were a testament to a seismic shift, a visual prophecy of the cultural earthquake that was about to hit. Clara laid out the finished prints on a clean counter, their surfaces still damp, the smell of fixer clinging to them. She stepped back, looking at them, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. This was it. This was why she had picked up a camera in the first place. This was the kind of truth she wanted to show the world. She couldn't wait for Mr. Finch to see them. The next morning, Clara arrived at the Memphis Chronicle office earlier than usual. A large envelope containing her freshly printed photographs clutched tightly in her hand. The newsroom was still quiet. The desks empty, save for a few early bird reporters typing away. Her heart thumped with a mix of anticipation and nerves. She knew these photos were special, but would Mr. Finch, with his practical, no-nonsense approach to journalism, see them the same way? She found Mr. Finch at his desk, spectacles perched on his nose, already poring over the morning edition. He looked up as she approached, a slightly tired but expectant expression on his face. "Morning, Clara. Get anything worthwhile down at Sun Records?" he asked, taking off his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. "I think so, Mr. Finch," Clara said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. She laid the envelope on his desk and carefully slid out the prints, arranging them for him to see. Mr. Finch leaned forward, curiosity in his eyes. He picked up the first print. It was the shot of Elvis mid-performance, head thrown back, hair slightly wild, a raw, almost primal energy emanating from the image. His eyes widened slightly. He picked up another. This one captured Elvis in a dynamic blur of motion, his legs a whirlwind, his body a fluid extension of the music, then another, a close-up of his intense, captivating eyes. As he flipped through the stack, the usual skepticism on his face slowly melted away, replaced by an expression of genuine awe. He stopped at the photo of Elvis, looking directly into the camera, a hint of a smile playing on his lips, an undeniable spark in his gaze. He held it up, scrutinizing it. "Good heavens, Clara," he muttered, almost to himself. "Who is this young man?" "Elvis Presley, sir. He's the singer. He drives a truck, but he's got a voice and a way of moving." Clara trailed off, knowing words couldn't fully describe it. The photos, she hoped, would do the talking. Mr. Finch nodded slowly, still staring at the print. "Way of moving is an understatement. This isn't just a boy singing. This is something else entirely." He looked up at Clara, his eyes shining with an uncharacteristic excitement. "These aren't just good shots, Clara. these are electrifying. There's a power here, a raw energy I haven't seen captured in a photograph in a long, long time. Clara felt a wave of relief wash over her. He saw it. He truly saw it. "We need to put these on the front page," Mr. Finch declared, his voice rising with conviction. "Forget the Memphis's new sound piece. We're doing a feature on him. On Elvis Presley. This is more than just a local story. This is a revelation." He called over a layout artist, his instructions rapid and enthusiastic. "Clear the front page. We're running with these photos, big, bold, and get me a reporter, a good one, to write a profile on this boy. Who is he needs to know." Clara watched a surge of pride swelling in her chest. Her camera through her had delivered it. It captured not just an image, but a future. The photos were dynamic, full of life, conveying the very essence of Elvis's unique charisma. They were an invitation, a challenge, a declaration. The newsroom, which had been slowly filling, began to buzz as word spread. Reporters and editors gathered around Mr. Finch's desk, murmuring in astonishment as they looked at Clara's prints. They recognized the raw power, the undeniable stark quality radiating from the images. "Clara, these are incredible," Frank, the sports reporter, said, shaking his head in disbelief. "You caught the fire, all right?" Clara smiled, a genuine, wide smile that reached her eyes. She had captured the fire. And now the Memphis Chronicle, thanks to her camera, would be the first to introduce that fire to the world. She imagined people picking up the paper, seeing those images, and feeling the same jolts she had felt in that small studio. The camera hadn't just fallen in love. It had become an evangelist, spreading the gospel of a king. The morning the Memphis Chronicle hit the newsstands, Memphis awoke to a phenomenon. Clara had seen the proofs, knew the photos were striking, but seeing them splashed across the front page, larger than life, was a different experience. Entirely. There he was, Elvis Presley, captured in a moment of raw, untamed brilliance. Her photographs, stark and captivating, dominated the layout, demanding attention. The accompanying article spoke of a revolutionary sound, but it was the images that truly spoke volumes. The newspaper sold out before noon. The phones at the Chronicle office began ringing off the hook. People called, wanting to know more about the truck driver, who sings like an angel and moves like the devil. They called in disbelief, in excitement, in curiosity. Some scoffed, others were instantly captivated, but no one. Clara found herself fielding calls, not just from local residents, but from wire services and other publications, as far away as Nashville and New Orleans. They wanted to know who had taken them, how she had managed to capture such an electrifying presence. Mr. Finch, usually composed, walked around with a giddy smile, his chest puffed out with pride. "Clara, my dear, you've done it. You've absolutely done it." Clara felt a profound sense of accomplishment. It wasn't just a job well done, it was a moment of true impact. Her photographs were not just documenting a local talent. They were launching a national sensation. She had seen the spark, and her camera had fanned it into a flame. Sun Records also saw an unprecedented surge of interest. Sam Phillips was suddenly fielding calls from major record labels' talent scouts. Elvis's phone, once mostly silent, now rang incessantly. The demand for his first record soared. Clara was assigned to cover Elvis more extensively. She was there for his first few live performances in Memphis, photographing the burgeoning crowds, the screaming teenagers, the stunned adults. Each time she tried to capture the evolution, the growing confidence, the almost overwhelming adoration that now surrounded him. But none of those later shots ever quite matched the raw, unpolished magic of that very first session. Those initial photographs of Elvis, the ones she had taken that day at Sun Records, became iconic, almost overnight. They were reproduced in magazines, on posters, and promotional materials. They were the world's first true glimpse of the king-to-be, and Clara's lens had been the one to capture it. She saw the impact of her work firsthand. People would point to her photos in the newspaper, their eyes wide with excitement. Teenagers would cut them out and pin them to their bedroom walls. Her camera had shown the world not just a face, but a force. It had introduced a shy truck driver from Tupelo, Mississippi, and made him an overnight sensation in Memphis, the first step on his journey to global superstardom. Clara often thought back to that day in the small, dusty studio. She remembered the quiet anticipation, the subtle shift in the air, when he walked in the electrifying moment. His voice filled the room, and the way her camera had seemed to pulse in her hands. It wasn't just a professional assignment, it was a spiritual awakening. She had felt the undeniable connection, the pure artistry flowing from him. And her camera had been ready, willing, and able to absorb it all. It had been the camera's first encounter with true unbridled genius, and it had responded with an outpouring of its own kind of love. The love of an instrument with a subject that truly brings it to life. Years passed. Then decades. Elvis Presley became not just a star, but a global icon. A legend whose music and image permeated every corner of the world. His name was synonymous with rock and roll, with rebellion, with charisma, and still, those first photographs, Clara's photographs, remained iconic, often used to define his early explosive beginnings. Clara, now a renowned photographer in her own right, no longer worked for the Memphis Chronicle. Her early work with Elvis had opened doors, allowing her to pursue more ambitious projects, to truly capture the soul of America through her lens. But she never forgot that day at Sun Records. In her studio, a quiet, sunlit space filled with the scent of paper and chemicals, she kept a framed print of one of those first Elvis photos. It was the one where he looked directly into the camera, a hint of a smile playing on his lips, that spark in his eyes, undeniable. It was a tangible reminder of the moment. Her passion for photography had been truly reignited. She would often sit and gaze at it, remembering. She recalled the heavy feel of the speed graphic in her hands, the almost physical pull towards him, the way her instincts had taken over, guiding her to capture, not just an image, but a feeling. It wasn't about the technical perfection of the shot. It was about the truth it conveyed. She thought about how many photographs had been taken of Elvis since that day. Millions, probably, but those first ones, hers, had held a unique power. They were the world's introduction. A glimpse into a nascent force that would soon reshape music and culture. The phrase Mr. Finch had used, electrifying, still resonated with her. That's exactly what he was. And her camera, usually so objective, had been electrified too. It wasn't just a piece of machinery, it was an extension of her own wonder and awe. Through her, it had surely seen him, not just as a subject, but as an extraordinary phenomenon. The camera, she mused, had fallen in love with Elvis Presley. It was a pure artistic love, devoid of romance, yet profound in its intensity. It was the love of an artist's tool for the perfect subject, a symbiotic relationship where one brought the other to life. It was the moment the lens found its ultimate purpose, recognizing the undeniable charisma, the raw talent, the world-shaking potential. Clara's career had been shaped by that encounter. It had taught her that the greatest photographs weren't just seen with the eyes, but felt with the heart. It had taught her to trust her instincts, to chase the spark, to find the hidden magic in the mundane. She ran a finger over the smooth glass of the framed print. The image of young Elvis, vibrant and full of promise, stared back at her. He had changed the world, and in a small, yet significant way, she and her camera had been there at the very beginning, capturing the first visual testament to his undeniable reign. It was about a photographer through her camera seeing a legend before he became one. It was about the magic that happens when an instrument of capture meets a subject that truly demands to be captured. It was the moment a camera fell in love, and in doing so helped the world fall in love too. And the legacy of that love, frozen in time, continued to captivate for generations to come.